See, what's happening is Jonah is finally seeing the grace of God. And what is grace? Grace is when God gives you good things when you only deserve bad things. Grace is when God gives you life and joy and peace when all we deserve is destruction. Grace is kind of like, it's kind of like if you went to a 5-star hotel, right? And you're at this hotel and you're enjoying life and you're like having fun and you're looking at the views, you're enjoying the beach, you're getting like the complimentary massages. And while you're at this hotel, you come at like the room service menu, right? And the room service menu has like all these super good foods, but it doesn't have the price, and you just kind of like assume everything's free. And so you start ordering everything. You're like getting the gourmet breakfasts, you're getting the crab and the lobster and the filet mignon, you're getting like all the awesome desserts they have, and you're just enjoying it, but you don't realize like all this time you're racking up charges against you. And you're just like totally oblivious to it. And you go down like after the whole vacation's over and you go to the checkout clerk, and she's like, and you're expected to pay like the $500 or $1,000 or whatever you paid for this trip. And she's like, you owe me $30,000. And you're like, oh no, like I could not pay that. Like there's just no way, absolutely, like I don't have that money. And she's like, you kind of have to pay it, right? And you're like, what do I do? And she's like, what the heck do I do? So she calls the owner of the hotel, and the owner like comes down, and this whole time you're just thinking, what's gonna happen? Like, what am I gonna have to do? Like, my life is totally ruined after this point. I can never pay that back. And grace is like when the owner comes down and he looks at all your charges, everything that's against you. Instead of holding you accountable, he says, you know what? I'm gonna pay for all that food. I'm gonna pay for you. And you know what? I'm not just going to pay for the food that you overcharged out of my own pocket. I'm going to pay for your room too. We're glad you're here. It's like, you know what?
It's good, Micah.
Since I'm paying for the room, why don't I pay for you to come back? Like, I'm glad that you're enjoying our hotel. I like you being here. Next time, like, call me up. Like, enjoy my company. And
good.
That's what God does. And that's what God's done through Jesus, that we have racked up charges against ourselves. And instead of holding us accountable to us, he's like, I'll pay for them.
It's good. So good, Micah.
And what happens in the story, Jonah begins to see this. And at the end of the prayer, he says, when my life was fading away, I remember the Lord, and my prayer came to you in your holy temple. And with the voice of thanksgiving, I will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And we see Jonah, where at first he was running from the presence of God. Then he started seeing clearly the grace of God, who God was, who the God that went beside him was. And now he's finally willing to obey God. And once he gets to this point, it says, and the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. And then it says, and the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. God renews his calling on him, retells him his purpose, retells him what he wants to do. He renews the calling. He says, arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and call against it the message that I tell you. And then it says, so Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. When he finally saw the grace of God, he was able to be obedient. And it goes, and he travels all the way to Nineveh, whatever like 200 miles over here is, and it says it takes him like 3 days to preach through the whole city. And I want you to know that Jonah's being obedient, but even at this point in the story, he's still kind of a turd. Like, he's obeying God, but he's not doing like a really good job of it. Like, he's seen all this grace that God has for him, but he doesn't have it. He's like totally preaching fire and brimstone to all these people. Like, he's basically saying, you need to repent or you're going to die. You need to repent or you're going to die. And he's like, doesn't care what happens after that. He doesn't have like grace for them or anything. But that's how like he feels and stuff. But God still uses him. He's not doing it perfectly. He's not even doing a particularly great job, but God's using him. And it says that they began to repent all across the city. It says when the word reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, removed his robe, covered himself with mourning clothes and sat in ashes, and he repented, and he had the whole city repent. Even when he wasn't doing it perfectly,
Come on.
God was still using him. There's this really, really good quote that I'll try to live my life out that challenges me. It's by this guy named Moody, who started the Bible school that I go to and stuff. But the quote goes like this. It says, "The world has not seen what it looks like for a person to be totally dedicated to God." The world hasn't seen it. We all struggle, we all have problems of disobedience, we all have things that keep us from going all out to God. It's like the world hasn't seen it. But this is the part that challenges me. It says, I aim to be that man. I aim to follow God with all that I am. And D.L. Moody, this guy's crazy. He had a 3rd grade education. Dropped out after 3rd grade because he had to start working to feed his parents, or to feed his family. It was the 1800s. That was a common thing. It happened. But he only has a 3rd grade education, and he preaches to millions of people across his life. And people estimate that 1 million people became saved, heard the gospel, and professed saving faith because of his preaching and because of his efforts in evangelism. I guarantee with the 3rd grade education, a lot of you are more equipped to do that than he was, but he was faithful.
That's right.
What I want to do before we leave is just give some practical steps of how we move, like Jonah, from running to obeying. From running to seeing God clearly to being able to obey Him. I got 3 things for you. The first one is we just have to look at God. And that sounds simple, and it is simple, actually. That's the cool thing about it. We have to look at God, and we have to think about His grace. And the best way we do that is looking at Jesus Christ. This weekend, this Friday, is Good Friday. And that's where we remember what Jesus did when He died on the cross. And this Sunday is Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, and that's when we remember what happened when Christ raised from the dead. And the reconciliation and the new life that brought us to God. Jesus, when He was still living before He died on the cross, He said this. He's like, all these people, they want to see a sign from me. They want to see all these miracles happen. Well, what I want to do, I want to give them the sign of Jonah. And what He meant by that is Jonah was presumed dead for 3 days and 3 nights. He was in the belly of the whale, he was down there, and Jesus said, I'm going to die. I'm going to be buried for 3 days and 3 nights. But then just like Jonah came up, and there's new life there, and he went, and people were repenting. Jesus Christ is going to raise up from the dead, and people will repent and see God fully.
Yeah.
This is the part I love, that unlike Jonah, who was running away from God, Jesus Christ is God running to you.
That's good.
Unlike Jonah, who couldn't see the grace of God, Jesus Christ is God's grace displayed on the cross for you.
It's good. It's good, Micah.
And unlike Jonah, who has struggled to obey God, Jesus Christ obeyed God, even at the point of dying on the cross for you.
So good, Micah.
So this Easter, just take time to reflect on what Jesus Christ did and what that means for you. All right, we're on the second one. The second thing that I want you to do is start trusting God with the results.
Come
We don't
on.
have to be successful God doesn't call us to being successful, to seeing great things happen, to having big ministries, to seeing hundreds of thousands of people calling us to Christ. God calls us to be obedient.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
He calls us just to submit to Him and to try and to follow Him.
Yeah.
You don't have to be successful, just have to be obedient. And third, we share our testimony, we share the gospel. We think about what the gospel means. What did God do for us? What did Christ do? And we share it. If anything that we want to challenge you from this series, anything that we wanted to challenge you from the last 3 messages, is just share your faith with someone. Just share it. When we say share your testimony, I'm going to break down your testimony really easy. This is it. Who was I? What did God do? Who am I now?
Come
That's
on.
your testimony. Who was I? What did God do for me? And who am I now? How have I changed from that?
So good.
How does Jesus Christ make a difference in my life? And share that with someone. That's all I got. Pastor Zach, if you want to come up and close this out.